Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome out to another Student View. It's great that you could be here. So today we have Theresa, who will introduce herself now.
Hi, I'm Theresa. I am 24. I'm studying Masters in Management at UCL. I'm also student rep for my cohort of 230 students. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think the way obviously we've gotten to know Theresa through or especially myself through the program through UCL School Management is you take obviously a bigger role just than a student. You're obviously a student rep as well, similar to myself. And obviously through that we have obviously gotten to know you a bit from the meetings we've had with departmental meetings, and that's been great. And I think also talking about the leadership role leads quite nicely into today's topic, which I suppose is ESG, and especially that ethics kind of aspect of that. So yeah, I mean, do you want to have any first comments about the ESG in general that you've experienced in work experience or anything?
So I also have worked for business consultancy before, and we had a very big program on schooling and teaching companies on how to integrate ESG topics into their overall directive and becoming sustainable. Obviously, it's become mandatory now for especially large companies to report on ESG-related topics and performances, and so it's becoming more and more important, and it's quite the trend, obviously, for good reasons. And yeah, so I had a lot of experience with that.
What do you think about ESG in general? Because there is quite a famous NYU professor, one of the most famous finance professors, I guess, is Aswath Damodaran. I think that's right, the name. And his take is basically that ESG forces companies to basically disregard their profit goals just to fit under those made up purposes of ESG. What do you think about that?
Ooh, that's interesting. No, to be honest, I mean, it's very hard to just say, oh, I completely disagree with that. Obviously, in my opinion, or the way that we approached it so far, it should be something that should be looked into very holistically. Because if you think about what sustainability means, it also means economically viable and long-term feasible. So if a company really wants to, be sustainable as such, it has to integrate ESG topics, but that also means that the profitability as such is not being completely ignored. So it should all be working well together, because obviously if you, for example, don't emit as much, now including that, for example, there is CO2 emission tax in a lot of countries, that would actually mean also reducing costs for companies. Thus, it would actually, in the long run, be quite good to already think about these topics, and it does not harm profitability and financial performance of companies.
I think it's really interesting you brought up the carbon point, because there's a real, and your economics in the same point, because my background obviously being a bit of economics. I don't know if I've probably mentioned that one too many times before. Anyway, so I love the fundamental complexities that ethically carbon credit gives. I'm sure you've all heard about this, the idea obviously companies will get carbon credit and you can use it and you can sell off to another company. So the idea that obviously that's a form that the government uses to mitigate the amount of CO2 emitted, and it's just a great ethical question and also economical in your sense, the idea of profitability, trying to balance it. It's just really interesting. And I mean, you've also done some great posts on LinkedIn. Yeah, I remember we had a small conversation in comments talking about, like you mentioned,
that's true.
Defining ESG is really important. And I think in your post, you talked about the idea of do we define it, or at least I was commenting on that part, which was, what was it again?
I think it was the Moderam basically stated, not quote unquote, that is something like it forces those companies, and he would dismiss those guidelines completely, because I think I have quite a similar take on this, because in my opinion I would rather do develop through invention, so develop into sustainability, develop into social governance through innovation, and not basically disregard investment opportunities under the term sheet of ESG, to be more socially responsibility and stuff, and then dismiss on those opportunities who will eventually make you profitable, which then in turn could give you the money for research and development for those innovations,
So it seems like you're talking very much long-term aspects of what that is. Okay, interesting. Yeah, but I think going back to the ethical part of everything in general. You actually brought up a really interesting topic earlier, just before we started this. I think you brought up that one of the modules you've been doing was integrating the ideas of ethics and AI, which I think is so relevant nowadays. I mean, you hear ChatGPT everywhere in the world. You hear now Microsoft, yesterday, didn't they announce they're competing now with Google and OpenAI directly, which is a huge development. Although I believe that Microsoft and Google, especially Microsoft's first open display of the AI went horribly, so it'll be quite interesting to see the development of it. And do you want to just fill us in a bit about what you were talking about earlier?
So just to clear it up, we didn't talk about this in a module, but so basically the whole topic of AI, obviously it's in the School of Management, at least discussed quite a lot recently, which is good, obviously, because it's quite a big thing coming. And I think inevitably every company and every institution has to work with it now. And we talked about it, for example, for courses such as innovation practices. But even now for our business research module, a lot of students consider talking and discussing or researching AI. So it's quite interesting. And then to think about, how will that impact ethical topics such as ESG in the future? So that's where it all stems from. But generally, it's interesting if you think about, because as you said before, like innovation and long-term thinking, normally there are certain procedures and standards that you can apply to innovations so that they are being developed ethically. And for example, for AI, it is debatably, obviously, it's always on what kind of viewpoint you're coming from, whether that has happened so far. Because obviously, for example, ethical institutions who really research how to introduce something in the good way so it actually benefits society, they would always argue that you have to have diverse viewpoints working on a subject and give guidelines and, actually restrict the innovation, not innovate just for the sake of innovation itself. And debatably, that could have happened with AI so far. So we have to probably, as society, consider a little bit how to work with it and how to actually make it work for us and not the other way around.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, there was this quite famous open letter signed by Musk and many of the industry experts, right, to basically stop the development of generative AI. For those who don't know, generative AI, it's basically artificial intelligence which develops own consciousness. And considering what you already said, what do you think, like in general, about generative AI, also under the umbrella of ethics? I mean, you could basically exploit it in so many ways.
Mm-hmm. I try to not make definite statements about that, because we have been in a lot of discussions recently about that. So far, as I said before, in my opinion, personally, it should be approached more ethically than what has been done before, because a lot of voices of concern are being raised saying, oh my God, what are we doing? This is getting out of control, and it's being developed so far that actually we society can't catch up with what's happening, and the impact of it is not foreseeable yet. So I would agree with that, but I do think generally that it's not necessarily a bad thing, and that it can benefit us economically, especially also, for example, on ESG topics, on how to actually integrate a lot of change, especially seamlessly better. So yeah, that's my personal opinion, but.
Yeah. It's interesting you brought up economics again, the impact of this. And I think one thing that I think brought up was by Alex Marr a little from second term, and also some other people I've been talking to, was you hear about what's the next industrial revolution, and the next version, I guess, or the revolution after that, which I guess would be the biggest defined one we have previously. And apart from maybe you say globalization, but that's arguable for another time. But this idea that maybe technology is the next revolution, or AI is the next revolution for, I guess, economies, and there's a lot of them racing towards it. But the only thing that anyone's benefited off it, or the main people that's benefited, is not actually being as a whole, it's actually been the wealthiest people. As a result of being able to enable their use and being able to invest and being able to divulge with using AI as forms of, to replace certain aspects of their maybe companies they own.
Yeah, just to automate the process, right?
Automate the process. Yeah. It's obviously helped retain their wealth. It's helped, it's helped for them to decrease distribution of wealth. It's really interesting to see this impact and to think where it'll go next. I think I think there's been some statements about increasing tax and stuff, but it's all very interesting to know where AI is going and the impact and the earliest signs of any technological impact so far that's obvious to me, at least, without talking about some other, like security, of course, is seeing that obviously the wealthiest are staying the wealthiest, and if not, becoming more so. So I think there's definitely something there that will change in the future. I'm not sure how or what, but it'd be interesting to see where that goes, because fundamentally societies probably couldn't run like that in that direction forever.
Yeah.
And it'd be interesting to see if that's if that's a social evolution that comes where people actually find new ways and around that and actually get to benefit as well, hopefully, or whether that's a tax or government resolve, which again is ESG, I guess, all around.
Yeah, I think since we touched up on ethics in AI, since you now basically touched on wealth as well, there is a huge point where basically the wealthiest people have to not question themselves, but there's all this ethical basically conduct going on, how the wealth just stay the wealthiest they are. And what's your take like on general ethics in especially finance and like regarding the wealthiest people in the earth?
Why are you pointing at me? I was going to say, not me.
The wealthiest people.
Definitely not me.
No, I mean, I agree with what Lucas has said so far. It's quite interesting. It's unforeseeable at the moment. I mean, undoubtedly, we do have a problem that the wealth distribution is getting more extreme. So, as with most things in life, those who already are at an advantage, they will be able to benefit more from innovation, being able to deploy resources effectively, and then using the technology to obviously secure their position. That's again why it would be so important to have a lot of like ethical discussions and then perhaps guidelines and procedures in place so that doesn't happen further, because I can see that happen realistically quite well. So
Yeah, I think one last question regarding that topic. What do you think are the implied responsibilities from like the ultra rich to kind of go against that basically movement against like the generative AI and stuff? I mean, the open ladder is one thing, of course, but it's not stopping like the innovators, the great minds of our time, to further pursue their dreams of some ultimately generative AI. Yeah. So, what do you think are the implied responsibilities there?
That's a good question. That's a little bit like, how do you use your privilege? Like us talking about how they should use their privilege. I mean, to be honest, I think it's dangerous because obviously scientists often develop science for the sake of science, and then people who are very interested in raising their economic benefits, they do that for the sake of raising their economic benefit. They don't necessarily think of the overall impact on society, especially, depending on also what type of morals they're following, etc. So probably we can only hope that people will think about what the impact of them further developing it without actually distributing more benefits to society will have. It would be nice to see that people try to share and distribute the innovations and, help everyone in who's working with AI. But even, one good thing, for example, would be that the way that it works, with AI is the data that it's used. Based on that, it will work. So, for example, that's very simplified. I'm not an engineer, I have to clarify. But, there are certain biases with AI that if you don't eradicate them, they will continue in the way the application works. So, for example, with facial recognition, there have been problems before with certain minorities that the programs don't work as well for them. So that is something that where, for example, people who are better off could try to work and help and make sure that the database is very inclusive and not only for the benefit of themselves. But again, that's something where you would have to bring up the question, where should the government intervene, and what is the responsibility of just economically interested people?
Yes, yeah. Well, I think the resolution tell the lesson should be learned. Don't trust people. I think. Save yourself. Right. So I think that's a great ending note. Very bleak one, but very interesting, I think, which is great. So thank you so much for listening in, watching in on Student View. I hope you all have a great day. Obviously, we've all had a great day talking right now on this. And remember to like, subscribe, and hit that bell button. And if you have any, time, leave comments as well, because I think ESG is something everyone has an opinion about.
And AI as well.
And AI, it's huge subjects. And and if you don't want to talk about that in the comments, I don't know, talk about who's best dressed maybe. That could be fun too. But please, it's always great to hear everyone's opinions, especially about such a broad subject that anyone can, involve themselves in. And our future will be revolutionized by this in one form or another. Yeah. Thank you very much, and see you next time.
Yeah, and thanks for being here, and see you in the next episode. Bye.